Welcome to Q2's Embracing the New Business as Usual webinar, and a very special welcome to our valued clients and also those that we have not met before who are attending this session today. We really do appreciate having you all with us. For those of you who have not met me before, my name is Anne Cooper-Smith, and I'm the Director and CEO at Q2 Limited, and I'm today's presenter. So Q2 Limited are a boutique firm of business strategists and chartered accountants, and we specialise in helping SME business owners. So we've all heard of Charles Darwin, and he is perhaps most famous for our starting thought for the day, which is, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change. And the truth of that thought is all around us. If you think back to the dinosaurs, which were probably the strongest species that have ever roamed planet Earth, but they died out, and today the Earth is dominated by relatively puny humans. If we think about businesses that haven't survived, some of the greatest companies in the world didn't survive because of lack of innovation. So have a think about Kodak. In 1976, Kodak held over 85% of camera sales and 90% of film sales. And yet 30-something years later, they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Another example of a great company that didn't really make it is Xerox. Now on 31st of March 1999, Xerox was worth $128 a share. And yet by the 29th of December the year 2000, which is just less than 2 years later, it was only worth $12 a share. Now that's a decline of over 90% in less than 2 years. And 20 years later, in 2020, it's worth just $15 a share. And then another example is BlackBerry. Now in 2007, BlackBerry had more than half the market share of the mobile phones in the US. But in June 2007, the iPhone was released, and the rest, as they say, is history. And I guess, who has a BlackBerry today? Very, very few, and yet just about everybody has an iPhone. So we're living in a time of the most rapid change the world has ever experienced. And on top of that, we've got COVID-19 and the pandemic, which has changed the world forever. Things will never go back to the way they were before the pandemic. And for our businesses to survive and flourish, we need to recognise that and embrace it. So this webinar is about the new business as usual and how we can embrace the changes and try to make them work for us. So let's have a look at today's agenda. Today we're going to cover lessons from lockdown, how we can choose to change, and what the fundamentals are of adapting your business. Then how we can go about leaving no stone unturned, how we can pull all that together into a cohesive plan, and then what your next steps are and what support is available. But before I get stuck in, I just want to throw in our usual disclaimer, and that the information in this webinar is just educational and general in nature, and it's no substitute for tailored advice that's specific to your particular circumstances. First, I want to put some context around what we may mean by the new business as usual. Now, before COVID-19 and lockdown, we had the old business as usual. Then the crisis unfolded and most countries and many businesses went into lockdown and entered business unusual. Many businesses went into complete hibernation, and this was what we call the business continuity phase, when businesses had to try and ensure that they could survive the lockdown period. The business continuity phase was about crisis management, and the government then leapt in with various support programs, and those businesses with a full war chest were counting their blessings. Then there was an easing of lockdown restrictions, and we entered the current business recovery phase in New Zealand. At this point, business unusual continues as many people are still somewhat restricted in their movements, and the wage subsidy is still available for a few months more. The recovery phase is a time for reinventing how we operate our businesses. It's about mitigating risks and maximising opportunities. And it's also about reviewing your organizational structure and doing some detailed cash flow and business forecasting. As restrictions continue to ease, we are not yet out of the business unusual. In New Zealand, our borders remain closed, with the exception of returning Kiwis who are subject to 2 weeks quarantine. And also, many customers are still wary of travel, and they may be reluctant to spend money, or they may have already suffered severely during the lockdown, and they're still very much in the early recovery phase. On top of that, we have a general election in less than 2 months, and the pandemic is still raging offshore. And we also have a looming economic recession. Now, how big and how bad that recession may be, nobody yet knows. But we do know that the horizon is uncertain and the business environment is uncertain. And there's always a possibility that we may need to go back into lockdown like Melbourne has if we get community transmission once again. But at some point in the future, maybe 6, 12, 18, or even 24 months, we will enter the new business as usual. Now, interestingly enough, I was listening to the radio while driving on the weekend, and the person that was being interviewed was talking about the effect of COVID-19, and in particular, how it related to the number of overseas tourists that were visiting New Zealand. Now, he said that in his opinion, it could be a full decade before New Zealand get back to the number of overseas tourists that we had in New Zealand prior to the pandemic. And I thought, wow, a full decade. Wow. And then he went on to say that if the business model of any particular business is reliant on that target market or any other target market that has been adversely affected by COVID-19, then we really need to start looking for a new business model, perhaps targeting local tourists or changing their products or services to appeal to a completely new market. So it could be years rather than months before we get back to a new business as usual. So we need to plan for this now. And in the words of Charles Darwin, we need to be the most adaptable to change so that we survive. We all have learnt unique lessons from lockdown. And while many businesses were innovating and re-engineering and adapting and widening their lanes to find viability in strange and uncertain times, we talked about that in our last webinar, which explained these concepts. So if you missed that webinar, you can still go and watch. It's on our website. So just go to q2.net.nz/resources/webinars and you can watch on demand. Thinking about my own business, Q2, we've adapted to the new environment by running webinars such as these for our clients and also by holding more meetings online. We've also refined the way we operate to cope more efficiently with remote working. And we widened our lane by adding services such as helping business clients with their business recovery planning, which is basically business planning on steroids, to help SMEs recover from the COVID crisis and establish a new business as usual, whatever that might look like. Last month in our webinar, we mentioned the beer business that pivoted during lockdown by producing hand sanitizer rather than beer. And we also talked about the company that changed from selling travel pillows to hair clippers. So during and immediately after lockdown, many cafes also broadened their offering from purely cabinet food and coffee to include ready-made meals and box sweet treats, and other cafes started selling wholesale ingredients and even ingredient bundles with recipes for making their own signature treats. And many of Q2's clients have adapted as well. One of our clients started pivoting by importing PPE gear rather than the normal product ranges. Another client started running medical diagnostic sessions via Zoom rather than doing them face-to-face. And other printing companies started printing COVID-19 specific signage and so on. So what are some of the other lessons that we've learned from lockdown? Well, we do know that when it's forced on us, change can happen very fast. We also found that working from home is great for some and it sucks for others. And I'm talking here about both businesses and team members who have often had very different experiences on working from home. We've also established that technology can be your friend if you're agile, or it can be your enemy if you're slow to adopt or adapt. And we also know that having a war chest of cash is not a nice to have, it's really a must have. Now, on that last item about having cash available, ideally it is cash in the bank, but it could also be an available finance facility. I have always recommended that business owners and investors have an undrawn line of credit available to them at all times, but especially when they don't need it. Because the reality is when you do need cash, or indeed a great investment opportunity arises, cash can often be very hard to get quickly. And at the moment, most banks are being very risk adverse and fairly slow to approve loans because they're simply inundated and don't have sufficient resources. So those businesses with cash or an undrawn line of credit really have a really valuable safety net at this time. Now, how much cash should be in your war chest? What we recommend is at least 3 months of expenses, and that includes wages and salaries. And there's a process we recommend to build up your war chest. If you're interested in this, please talk to us about our Profit First process or ask us about it in the survey at the end of the session. So we know that we need to change and adapt, but is knowing enough? You think about some of the things that you've changed in your business as a result of lockdown. Whereas some of those changes that you made, things you had considered previously but never quite got around to? Or did you make some changes during lockdown and then perhaps reverted back to the old ways of doing things as soon as we got back to stage one? Or perhaps you're a relatively early adapter and adopter, and the lockdown may have forced your competitors to play catch up. Now, if that's the case, then to stay ahead, you will need to refresh and invest in new competitive advantages so that you can stay ahead of the curve and ahead of your competitors. Now, we all know that change is not easy, but it's really, really essential in the current environment. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to share with you 4 different mindsets that can help you make change and make change easier for you in the future. The first mindset that I want to share with you is what we call ALLBET, which is an acronym. And I talk about this to quite a few of my Q2 business clients. In times of crisis, we have 2 choices about how we can respond. We can act below the line, or we can act above the line. Now, below the line actions would go something along these lines. We can blame someone else for bringing the virus into our country and forcing us to close a border, or we can blame people in quarantine who are escaping and perhaps spreading the virus in our community. Or we can make excuses about why there's nothing we can do about it, and there's nothing we can do about our financial situation. Or we can just go into denial and pretend that it's not even an issue and nothing actually needs to be addressed. And if we go into denial like that, we're really putting ourselves and our team and our business at great risk. Or we can act above the line. Now, by acting above the line, we can take ownership that we can and must do something to protect ourselves and our business, even if that means, in the very worst case scenario, closing our business or perhaps adopting a new business model. We need to recognise that we are accountable to our families and our team and our customers at this time of crisis. And we need to take responsibility for protecting ourselves and protecting our team, protecting our customers, and the very future of our business from these difficult times. The fundamental mindset here is that we have a choice, and we must not disempower ourselves by taking on a victim mindset. So when we are acting above the line, we're speaking from the I. We're being an adult, we're taking control, we're seeing it, doing it, and owning it. Whereas when we're operating below the line, we're speaking from the you. We're being childlike and out of control, and we're ignoring or waiting and seeing and just saying, actually, it's not my job, and not showing initiative. So acting above the line is a choice and you're acting as a victor, whereas below the line, you're justifying the reasons why it's not your fault and you're playing the victim. This is a really, really powerful concept, and it's a really powerful concept also to share with your team. So the second mindset is what we call the 5 A's of change. And I'm going to talk about this specifically in the concept or context of changes that are needed as a result of COVID-19. Now, although we may know we need to change, the 5 A's of change help us to identify the progression of action steps that are actually necessary to make those changes. Remember that change is not easy, and it's okay to feel apprehensive about changing how we run our businesses. So the very first step is to be aware of what needs to change, why something needs to change, and what will happen if things don't change. So for example, we may need to right-size the business, or we may need to carry cash reserves, as I mentioned earlier. Consider also that you may need to explain to your team why change is necessary so that they understand it also. Because for a business to change, the whole team must be on board, not just the business owner. And the next step is to accept that you must change. It's likely that COVID-19 crisis has raised your awareness and acceptance that change may be necessary. So for example, you may decide to adopt a proper first approach and set funds aside for taxes and emergencies and to build your war chest. Or you may need to reduce operating expenses or become more efficient in particular areas. Then the third step after acceptance is taking action. Because without action, nothing will change and your business will struggle to recover and flourish. Now, documenting what you are going to do in a written recovery plan is very often the first step towards taking action. Taking action may also involve delegating some of the projects on the action plan to your team to drive forward. And once again, this will only be successful if your team are aware of the reasons for the changes and that if they accept them as being necessary. The fourth step is accountability. And having someone independent holding you and your team to account will help to ensure that you actually do take the required actions to change. And then finally, the fifth step is acknowledging change and celebrating success, either on your own or with your team. And it's really important that we do this because unless we acknowledge how we are making progress and how we are making success, then it's really hard to stay on track. And the other thing you need to realize is that change is seldom instantaneous. It is really a process. So even if you as a business owner are aware of the change that's necessary, you are likely to also need to use the 5 A's of change to get your team on board to understand and accept the changes that are needed. Now, just as an example, when we go through the legal restructuring process, which is often making somebody redundant, that process roughly follows the 5 A's of change process. So for example, the first step is normally awareness by the team that the current organisational structure needs to change and the reasons for that. Then the second step is consulting by discussing the various options and possibilities, such as perhaps reduced working hours or redundancy, and basically accepting that some type of restructure is necessary. Then the third step of restructuring is actually taking action by actually making a decision and then carrying out the restructure work and implementing it. The fourth step of accountability is being accountable to the team once the decision has been made and implemented. And then finally, we need acknowledgement, and we need to acknowledge and recognise the impact that the restructure will have normally on the team, on morale, on customers, and basically on the way we run our businesses. Now, as a business owner, understanding the 5 A's of change can help you do what's required and also help you take your team with you on this difficult journey of change. Now, the third mindset that I want to share with you is what we call the atomic habits mindset, and it's based on a book by James Clear of the same name. Now, if you haven't read this book, you really should read it, as it is really excellent and it contains a number of strategies and ideas to help create improved habits. But in summary, the book talks about what we call outcome-based habits. And these outcome-based habits are less likely to be successful because we're not recognizing the need to change our very identity. The habits will either not normally stick because we will revert back to our old identity, or we'll give up those habits once we've achieved the outcome that we're going for. So for example, let's say we want to lose 10 kgs in weight and we start going to the gym every day. Now we're likely to either give up because going to the gym every day is hard, or we'll get to our goal of 10 kg weight loss and then we'll stop going to the gym. And this is because we were focused on the outcome we wanted, which was losing 10 kg. And we changed our habits in the short term, but we didn't actually change our identity. Thinking about this in a business sense, perhaps the outcome we want is increasing sales. But unless we change our habits and habitually do the things that drive sales, then we're unlikely to achieve the outcome that we want. So instead of focusing on the outcome, if we focus on who we need to be, which is our identity or our business's identity, then and how this needs to change, then we will form habits that are consistent with that new identity. And the outcomes will flow more naturally as we simply live into our identity. So for example, if we identify as being a fit and healthy person, and then we develop habits that a fit and healthy person would have, such as eating well, exercising, going to the gym or whatever, then the outcome is likely to be weight loss and long-term weight management. And then in a business scenario, if we consider what's the core purpose of our business, why does our business exist? What problems are we trying to solve for our customers? And then we consider how our actions tie into those core purposes and what habits and actions we need to develop to fulfill that core purpose in relation to our customers. Then the habits and actions around that core identity will create the outcomes that we are trying to achieve. So if we want the outcome to be increased sales, then we probably need to identify as a customer-centric business and create systems and processes and procedures to regularly stay in touch with our customers so that we can better understand exactly what our customers are wanting. So that was the third mindset. And the fourth mindset is what we call the rubber band model. And it comes from the decision book, 50 Models of Strategic Thinking. So when making a decision, there are two options. And if you imagine there are two rubber bands around you, one is holding you back and one is pulling you forward. Now, both rubber bands are equally important because one represents careful consideration and doing things step by step with great process and identifying and mitigating risks. And that's the rubber band that's holding you. The other rubber band represents the need for change and the need for progress and to find better ways to reach your goals. Now, by analysing what's holding you and what's pulling you, the result will be a carefully considered way forward. So for example, if you're thinking of offering a new product or service line, what's holding you back from doing that? Perhaps it's not knowing if there is a market for that product or service. Perhaps it's not understanding the pricing or the delivery dynamics. Understanding these risk factors and then how to mitigate them before making a decision is important. But then consider also what's pulling you forward into this new direction. Perhaps it's a realization that sales are stagnant at this current time and we need to add a new direction or a new product line, or we need to diversify our customer base or our product offering in order to move forward. So we recognize that we have one rubber band pulling us forward to opportunity and change. And we also have one holding us back, which helps us review the risks. And this is different from having a list of pros and cons, especially if you think of the pros as being positive and the cons as being negative. The rubber band model is also useful if two business owners have different views on what change looks like. One business owner may be wanting to dot the I's and cross the T's and manage risks and create robust processes, which is slowing down and holding the process back. Whereas the other business owner may want to move forward to capture new opportunities for innovation, adaptation, and re-engineering, but they may not have considered all the risks in sufficient detail. So this rubber band model helps bring these divergent and equally important viewpoints together to find a consensus as to the best way to move forward, considering both the risks and the opportunities. And using this rubber band methodology when two business owners have innately different decision-making processes and tendencies can also help avoid a stalemate situation. So the four mindsets that we've just covered are extremely useful to learning how to embrace and implement change. And just quickly again, we covered ORBID, which is operating above the line, taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility. We covered the 5 A's of change, which is recognizing and embracing the process and taking your team on the journey with you. Then we talked about the atomic habits, about being congruent by embracing identity-based change rather than short-term and relatively superficial outcome-based change. And then finally, the rubber band model, which is carefully considering what's holding you as well as what's pulling you so that you can make good decisions and avoid a stalemate situation. So now that we know what adaptation is, it's innovation, re-engineering, reinvention, or widening our lane, and we have 4 powerful mindsets to help us embrace change. What are the fundamentals that we need in place to adapt our business? So the first thing is to take a team approach. It's highly likely that your team will have many ideas about how you can improve your business. So make sure that you involve them. Also recognize that your team need to understand the why as well as the what and the how for adaptation and change to be successful. Then also make a plan. Now during lockdown, it's likely that you thought of many business ideas about how you can adapt. And if there's more than one business owner of the business, there's a risk that you may have divergent ideas. So making a plan ensures that you get alignment and clarity and commitment to your new business direction. It's also important that you do budgets, and in particular a revised personal budget with trimmed personal costs, which will help reduce the cash flow strain on your business. And a revised business budget will give you more certainty and control. For example, establishing your minimum viable weekly sales that you need to survive. Then there's risk analysis. A risk analysis is best practice for all businesses, but it's even more important now. An inability to pay debts as they fall due or having poor reporting systems are examples of the risks that your business may currently be facing. A risk analysis helps you identify strategies to mitigate those risks. And doing pre-work prior to a planning meeting ensures that your meeting is not one of discovery. In other words, you don't waste time catching up on information in a meeting that could have been completed as pre-work. And we're going to talk more about pre-work shortly as it relates to the business recovery and planning process. And then having independent accountability will ensure that you actually do get things done. We are all super busy, and at times the important things that aren't urgent, like planning, they just don't get done, even though we have the best intentions. In addition to that, independent accountability gives you the ability to combine your own expertise, somebody who knows your own business really, really well, with somebody else's so that you come up with an even better plan than you could on your own. The most important aspect of planning is to understand the difference between governance and management. Now, governance is often referred to as working on the business, whereas management is working in the business. The governance role is accountable to the shareholders and the company, and the directors must set the direction and determine the strategies to get there. So governance in action involves determining what is the purpose of the business, which we talked about earlier, so that we can come from an identity-based place. We need to create an effective governance culture, and we need to be able to hold management to account and ensure effective compliance. The management role, on the other hand, is being accountable to the board of directors to implement those strategies and achieve the purpose and the vision. So managing an action involves things such as ensuring the business is on track to achieve the goals and ensuring the performance of the 7 departments is accountable, are on track. And these departments are the product and service department, operations, marketing, sales, finance, admin, IT, and human resources. The business recovery plan is a combination of working on your business and in your business. And you need to get it right down to the operational areas of the business to find the savings, efficiencies, adaptations, and improvements. We've talked about the 10 departments in every business before, and no matter what size of business, small business owners just normally wear more of the 10 hats, and the smaller the business, typically the more hats the business owner wears. So the 10 hats of the business and their functions are, first of all, is shareholders at the top, and they fund or finance the business. And then we have the directors who set the direction. And we talk about those two roles as being above the line and strategic. Not to be confused with above the line as an orbit, but these are strategic functions. And then below the line, we have the operational functions, which include leadership, which implements the plan effectively to maximize business efficiency and performance. We have product or service development, which is responsible for developing new and existing products or services for sale. Then we have the operations and delivery department, and this department actually delivers the products or services that actually generate cash. Then we have the sales department, and the sales department is responsible for converting prospects into clients or customers. And the marketing department is responsible for generating leads for sales to convert into those customers or clients. We have the finance department, and its role is to manage the business's cash. The admin and IT department is responsible for managing the office tasks and systems to maximize efficiency. And then finally, we have HR, which manages all the employment-related tasks, issues, and engages with the team. Now, your business recovery plan needs to identify the current risks, opportunities for improvement, the new goals and actions you need to take for each of these 10 departments. So, for example, you may have discovered that customers are slower to pay you now, and the risk here is that you may not be able to pay your debts as they fall due. So, your finance department goal may be to reduce your debtors days, which is the time it takes your customers to pay you on average. Maybe if your goal is to reduce your debtors day by, say, 10 days, and you've done the numbers, you will know that by doing that and achieving that goal, you'll actually free up to $15,000 in cash. And the actions you might need to take include a review of your terms of trade, perhaps, or perhaps better reporting of your debtors, or perhaps it's something like contracting out the external credit control role. So this level of detail is what you need to get down to for each of the 10 departments in your business as part of your business recovery plan. So unlike a business plan, which tends to be more strategic and high level, in times of crisis like we're in now, you need to be looking at all the aspects of your business and in more detail. So while you'll be working on your business when completing your plan, you need to get right down into the gunnels to find the opportunities of savings or improvements. In other words, we need to leave no stone unturned. So when we do a business recovery plan with a client, We send detailed pre-work for the business owner to think about beforehand. And this is partly what we mean by leaving no stone unturned. So for example, as pre-work, we might, under the new product or service department role, we may have questions such as, what new products or services have you developed during the crisis? And how have customers responded to those innovations? Or we may ask you, what new products and services are you planning to launch? And what's the break-even analysis? What have you completed for each of those? And will you discontinue any existing products or service lines? And if so, why? And in what other ways will you pivot the business? For example, adding additional after-sales service or focusing on mobile delivery and things like that. But these are the sort of questions we're asking under new product or service development. Then under the marketing role, we'll be asking things like, in what ways have you virtualized the customer experience? And how have you marketed this? Or how can you improve inbound digital lead generation? This is things like your website performance, social media strategies, providing content that is valued, and things like that. It's also, what is your communication and support plan for your key customers to maximize customer retention? Then thinking about your suppliers and your supply chain, we'll be asking questions such as, what challenges have you experienced with product or service supply stability, and how are you mitigating those risks? I think we all have recognized that a lot of the products and services are taking a lot more time because shops just do not have the supply of stock at the moment. They're waiting for things to come offshore, and it's taking a very long time. Also, we'll be asking you about what changes have you made to your purchasing policies to prevent overspending on stock or overheads? And what contingency plans have you put in place to ensure that you have alternate supplies? Or what critical changes do you need to make to your terms of trade to minimize losses from things such as customer insolvency? So for example, can you shorten your payment terms or increase your credit checks and limits or ask for personal guarantees and things like that? So the more detailed the pre-work, the better the plan will be. And it's more likely there'll be a lot of questions in the pre-work as part of this process that you have not even thought about before. And this is what we mean by leaving no stone unturned. So then let's look at how we can pull this together as a complete plan. Now, depending on your circumstances, your recovery plan should include things such as your personal budget, your risk register, your business recovery plan, your business forecast, an updated organizational chart if you have a team of people, and if you're going to apply for finance, a finance application. The outcome of a completed plan the outcomes of a completed plan include things such as the certainty and alignment of how to adapt the business to survive and thrive, how we can reduce the cash flow strain on your business by reviewing both your personal spending and your business spending. It will also create clarity around things like what your minimum weekly sales are to be viable, or what the key projects are that you need to get done in the next 90 days. Another outcome will be a complete package to share with your financiers if you are going to support new lending or, support new lending or ask for new lending. And of course, by having a plan in place, it will also give you peace of mind, and it will give you the ability to sleep at night knowing that you have a plan in place. Now, you may not need to do all this work at the same time. So for example, you may have sufficient cash flow right now, so you don't need to apply for finance. And likewise, if you don't have a team, you won't need to update your organizational chart. But what is important is that you establish what's right for you and what combination of these things that you need to do and who's going to do them. So now it's time to consider what your next steps are. And here's a useful model to to ensure that you get the results that you really want and need to get. So the first thing, the D, stands for decisions. You will have literally hundreds of ideas in your head about what options you have in all aspects of your business. And by documenting these ideas into a plan, you're making positive decisions about what you will and what you won't do. Now remember, what you can say yes to is defined by what you can say no to. And sometimes the plan is more about getting a very clear focus on the few things that you need to do that will have the most impact. So your decisions right now could be as simple as being committed to making a plan. Then the second thing is the actions, A. The plan will include the actions that you need to take to adapt your business. Detailed step-by-step actions that minimize risk and maximize opportunities. Likewise, the action you commit to right now could be to do your business recovery plan yourself, or perhaps have us review it, or alternatively have us involved throughout the whole process. And then the next A is about accountability. In order to get results, it's usually not enough to make decisions and agree on the actions that you need to take, because most people need somebody to hold them accountable to completing those actions. If you think back to your school days, if you didn't have a teacher or a parent holding you to account for doing your homework, would it have got done? Or you think about your personal trainer, if you have one. If you didn't commit to the sessions with your personal trainer, would you go to the gym as often? So Q2 are here to help you make sure that you not only complete the plan, but will also support and coach you so that you get the results that you want. Now, our aim here is to help you take what you've learned today and implement some positive changes in your business. And as we always say, doing nothing is not an option. Doing what you've always done is unlikely to get you the same results that you've had in the past. And remember to focus on what you can do as opposed to worrying about what is outside your control. Think back to the all-bed model that I shared with you earlier. Stay above the line and take ownership. Be responsible and be accountable. And here at Q2, we're here for you and we want to help. So our recommended strategy is for you to complete a business recovery plan. If you haven't already done a business recovery plan, then now is the time to do it, as it's going to form the foundation on which to build your cash flow improvement strategy. It will also help you with loan applications that you may need in the future. So the options to complete a business recovery plan are meeting with us face-to-face or online, and we can do it together. Either we can do it as one session of up to 4 hours, or we can do two-hour sessions, spread them apart. We'll send you the in-depth pre-work to complete so that you have time to consider the impact that COVID-19 has had on each department in your business, as I showed you earlier. We'll also use that completed pre-work as a guide and it will help us guide you through the plan and set the goals for each of your departments. And this will ensure that you have a detailed and well thought out plan and give yourself and your business the best chance of recovery. Our usual cost for this service is $2,500 plus GST, but we're offering this service at a discount to help those businesses that have been affected by COVID. The second option is to meet with us face-to-face or online for a business recovery planning session where we work together, and we'll also help you prepare an updated cash flow forecast and a finance application. The third option is to do a bottom-up budget and cash flow forecast with you. The third option is we can assist you with a complimentary business plan review or business recovery plan review. And we'll send you the business recovery action plan to complete, which is a condensed version of the plan. And this option will suit those of you who may have a small business that doesn't require a comprehensive business recovery planning process. And once you've completed the action plan, we'll schedule a 50-minute call with you to review the plan and what your next steps are. The risk, of course, with this approach is that with everything else that's going on right now, you may not get around to actually doing the work required. And then finally, if you're really unsure of the best way forward, or you just want to talk to us about how we may be able to work together, we recommend just having a complimentary meeting with us to discuss your goals, your current problems and your challenges, and then we can agree on the best way that we may be able to help you and support you. Now, if you're going to need to obtain business finance, we believe it's vital that you prepare a cash flow forecast. The loan will need to be repaid, so your business needs to generate enough profit and then convert that into cash to make the repayments. And we know that it may be difficult to commit to spending money right now, but we do have different payment options available. So please don't let cash and cost be a barrier. Get in touch with us and we'll work it together and come to sort of arrangement that you might better manage. We do know that the benefits you'll get from these services will be far greater than what our fee is, and most importantly, it's about helping you as quickly as possible and ensuring that we can work with you to build a stronger and more resilient business. So thanks for making the time to attend this webinar. We appreciate that your time is really, really valuable, and we hope that we've given you plenty of ideas to think about and some clear options for how you can move forward to embrace change and how we can support you. But before I go, I thought I'd just quote with you that even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. So please make a simple plan today. Commit to 3 actions that you'll take as a result of today's webinar. Write them down, give each of them an owner and a completion date. And remember, if you need our support, we are here for you. And before I wrap up, I'd like to mention that our next webinar on the very important topic of getting paid. And this is as COVID's induced recession starts to bite in, it's going to be imperative that we have best practices in place to ensure that we get paid for the work we do and the products we sell, because our very survival of our business will rely on that. So our next webinar is going to cover those best practices, as well as how to effectively implement them when many of our customers and clients may also be struggling in their own businesses. And this webinar will address the dilemma of how to balance your own need for cash with our desire and indeed requirement to support our customers in their own needs. So it's really a delicate balancing act requiring what we call both heart and backbone. And it will also be a great webinar for your admin people to attend, the ones that are involved in credit control. So watch out for that. So our Getting Paid webinar will be held on Wednesday, the 26th of August at 2 p.m. So finally, thanks for making the time available to attend today. We really do appreciate your time and we know it's valuable. And we hope we've given you plenty of ideas today about how to embrace change and some clear steps for you and your business. And hopefully we'll see you all on the 26th of August at 2 p.m. for our next webinar. That's all from me. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.